Welcome everybody back to Daf Yomi. We are going to be continuing on Daf Dalid of Eruvin. Yesterday we were going through talking about the various measurements and how they related to how we measure the dimensions of both a sukkah as well as a mavoi. Whether or not we use an amma that's made of 5 tvachim or 6 tvachim. And we were also discussing as to how do we know what the measurements are. From where do we learn it? And we, a lot of the discussion centered around the pasuk of Eretz Chitav Sarah, Gevin Tinav Rimon, Eretz Hashem Dvash, which made for a very nice mnemonic to help remember, as we included in the end, that it wasn't actually, that's not the true source. The true source is Halachah Moshe Sinai. Just that pasuk happens to be a very good way of remembering what exactly each measurement is and what each measurement relates to. So going hand in hand with that, something that was mentioned as a pure Halacha Moshe Sinai, we have another one listed there. So what is it? It starts talking about Chatzitzin. So Chatzitzin meaning that a impediment between you and the water when you are going to the mikvah. Chatzitzin D'Oraita, again, we're on Dalad Amud Bet, around 8 lines from the top, Chatzitzin. So Chatzitzin D'Oraita Ninu Tichtiv Vrachas et Kol B'Saro Shlo Yehei Davar Chotzetz Ben B'Saro L'Mayim. So how do we know that Chatzitzin are D'Oraita? Because the pasuk says in Vayikra that when the Kohen Gadol is to go wash his body, it says Kol B'Saro, that which says all this entirety. It says Kol B'Saro, all of his flesh. That means that there's nothing between his flesh and the water. B'mayim mikvah kol b'saro. So now we're going to go on to be darshaning a bit more about how each of these words and what they mean. So when it says the word b'mayim at the end, what does that mean? B'mayim is b'mei mikvah. Rashi b'mei mikvah hamuchunatzin mashma v'aflagav delav chayim milok tiv chayim. So here we're talking about when the Kohen would be Tovel on Yom Kippur. It doesn't say Mayim Chaim, which would mean fresh spring water, as it says by Metzger, or by whether you're doing the water for the Paraduma. So therefore, it needs to be water that's not Mayim Shuvim. But it could be gathered rainwater, which wouldn't be kosher for everything that's done in the Beit Midrash. So that's what we learned from the word b'mayim at the end of the pasuk. So kol b'saro, mayim. So what do we learn from the words of kol b'saro? Mayim shekol gufo ola bahen. So when it says kol b'saro, it's telling us for the quantity of water that has to be enough water for the whole body to fit. So v'kamahen, and how much is that amount of water? Amma al amma barom shlosha amma. So how much water is that? So instead of giving us a volume measure of Arbim Sa that you may remember, instead it gives the dimensions of which will give us the Arbim Sa. So that's the 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 amma. So basically 3 cubic amma is the volume that the mikvah would have to have, because b'shir chachamim may mikvah arba'im sa. And then what did the chachamim say that's equivalent to? That's equal to 40 sa. So so now we're going to go back to saying, wait, is this really a Halacha Moshe Sinai, or is this a drush? Like, what's going on here? So it's similar to what we had by the rest of the shiurim for dry measurements. So ki yitzrich hilchata l'zaros. Right. So what do we need? What do we need that for? Right. In order to give us the to teach us about your hair, that it could be puzzle if there's a chatzitza. Then now, even if let's say you fit entirely and it's the right size, but the chatzitza, that's still no good. That's what we're learning out from the puzzle of the kol b'saro. Not necessarily the measurement, but the fact that the chatzitza can be a problem. Rabba bar Rav Huna, and it's like Rabba bar Rav Huna states. That Rabba bar Rav Huna, nima achak shura chotzetzet. that if you have even one strand of hair tied, like you have a knot in your hair, then that's considered to be chatzitza. Shlosha and chatzitza. But if you have three hairs tied together, then it's not a chatzitza. The question is whether or not the water can get in or not, and depending on let's say if you have one hair tied in a knot, then it's definitely a very tight knot, and there's no way for any water to get in. But if there's three, it's loose enough that the water can still get in, and therefore it'll still be okay.
A quick question. So are we saying before kol b'saro meant that you can't have any kind of chatzitza? Now if we learn kol b'saro means you can't have knots in your hair, then would that allow to be some kind of chatzitza on the rest of your body that it doesn't have? Like I'm just trying to.
Right. So the point was that actually that the 40 sa and everything else we had before, that's already halacha Moshe Sinai. So the only thing that's new that's being learned out from the drasha, the truly new thing, is the din of chatzitza. The rest of it we already knew from halacha Moshe Sinai. So as far as to what that'll mean in terms of the dinim of chatzitza, we're not quite there yet. We'll hopefully we'll get there in a little bit as to what exactly is determined to be a chatzitza or not. For now, basically the basics that we're working off of is that if water cannot get to a place, then that's a problem.
Okay.
So shlosha, right? So we said one hair tied is a problem, three is not. Chaim and yodea. What if there's two? Then I don't know. Right? That's where we're on. So he says it's three. So this possibly would be his source. But then, so the Gemara question. So I'm not right too. But but we already know that you can't have any chatzitzas for your hair. We already know that's a problem. Detanya, brachas to kol b'saro. So the public says brachas to kol b'saro. What does that mean? It's a tafel b'saro. That the drush is that anything that's secondary to your body, meaning your hair. And that's your hair. Your hair is, it's part of your body, but the main part of your body isn't your hair. Your hair is just, to make, just look nice. So what do we need to learn? What do we need to learn then from this pasuk? Kiyatai hilchata lerubo lemioto lemakbid l'shein makbid. Rather, what are we actually going to come to learn about if it covers the majority of your body, or if it covers a minority of your body, and if you're makbid, and for things with which you're not makbid. Now we're going to have to explain what each of those things mean, because I was going to get a little bit confused. Okay, so whose opinion is this about, rubo? So rubo being the majority of your whole body being covered by something. Okay, mioto means the minority of your body is covered. Makbid means that whatever's on your body, it bothers you that it's there. Right, and then she'ein makbid, something you're not makbid about, something that you don't mind that it's there. So how all these categories, line up together, we're gonna see we're gonna see right now. Look, Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rabbi Yitzchak is going to tell us what each of these things actually mean and how they all sort together in terms of the right and the rabbanon, which are really the real problems of chatzitza. The Amar of Yitzchak, Devar Torah, Rubo, Umakbid Alav Chotzeitz, V'she'en Umakbid Alav Eno Chotzeitz. So Rabbi Yitzchak says that midoraita, right, on the biblical level, in order for something to be a chatzitza, it has to cover a majority of your body, and you have to not want it there. But if it's something that you simply don't want there, and it isn't covering the majority of your body, then it's not a chatzitza. It means that if you're covered in mud, and you feel gross, that's a problem. But let's say if you're happening right now, you decided to cover yourself in some sort of cream, some sort of lotion, and it covers the majority of your body, but you want it there for the purpose because it's going to be helpful for your skin, then that mean that wouldn't be a chatzitza midoraita. The Gazru al rubo she'eno makbid mishum rubo hamakbid, val miuto makbid mishum rubo hamakbid. So what happens? And midrabanan, they saw people were getting confused, so they made a gzeira on the cover the majority of the body, even if you're not makbid, because people would confuse that with the case where your body is covered and it bothers you, and also. Mishum rubo hamakbid, and also for the minority of your body is covered but it bothers you. because of the case of if it covers the majority of your body and your makbid. Right? Basically, we're worried that you're going to confuse when is it proper chalitza or not. So at the end of the day, we say that it would have to be mute, that it would be that rubo is a problem and makbid is a problem, as opposed to midoraita, where we would have to have both be a majority as well as being makbid for it to be a problem. So for being one criteria, you still two criteria to fill only one of the previous two criteria. So wait, so if that's really the case, then why don't we extend the Gzeir D'Rabbanan one more level? Why don't we say that even if it's the minority of your body and it bothers you, that should also be a problem for the mikvah. Alternatively, you could have made another one. Mishum rubo she'eno makbid, or you could have said that the reason why that should be a problem is because of the case of majority of your body that's not makbid. So why don't we say that? Why don't we say that anything's a problem for midrabanan for a chatitza? So why can't we do that? He gufa gzera v'ana nikum v'nikum gzera l'gzera. Right. So the problem is that there's a rule that once you have Gzeir D'Rabbanan, we don't make another Gzeir D'Rabbanan to protect the Gzeir D'Rabbanan. So since midoraita, you need it to be both rubo or makbid for it to be a problem. Then midrabanan, we said either if it's rubo or makbid, it's a problem. So we can't then come on and say that even if it's even lesser degree, we can't say that it's a problem. So,
and what we're discussing right now is chatzitza for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, or for anybody going to the mikveh. Everybody going to the mikveh.
Was from the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, like from that's where the Metzger's from. But what we're talking about now is for everybody whenever anybody goes to the mikveh. So this is for we have to go to mechitza for for an Isra, not because whether or not that. All these things wouldn't necessarily apply for going to the mikvah on Erev Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, because that mikvah isn't for that isn't necessarily a requirement to do mikvah where you say a bracha or for any isser. It's more of a it's mishum minhag. So then all these dinim we have of chatzitzas wouldn't apply to a man going to the mikvah on Erev Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur for assuming he's not planning on eating, in the modern era where there's no real way for a man to, short of base Midrash being rebuilt when people go on Har Beit. So until we have actual kachim and access to the Kodesh, you can't really men. It's not really as relevant for men nowadays, but it is very relevant. Which is very relevant for women, and when they go to the mikvah, because for them they have it. They're saying a bracha, and it's a mitzvah midoraita for them.
So just quickly, sorry. So for like a woman going in the mikveh, we're going to say doraisa, she could, and if she's not makbid, all these would apply, but the rabbis made a gezerah in order to be more stringent.
Correct. And we're even more stringent
than
the D'Rabbanan in the end, because as you asked in the beginning part about the hairs being tied up, so for women nowadays, in terms of what's considered to be a chatzitza, so we're also very makbid about, knots in the hair. So therefore, you have to, make sure you have to do eon. There's a lot of, details of how to properly get ready for the mikvah. That's more of those more discussed in Masechet Ida. So if you'd like to know more, we can discuss that at another point. But for now, we're going to continue on with the next part of the Gemara. So now that we've done with chatzitzas, we're not going to talk about mechitzas instead. So mechitza to right in So the fact that there's such thing as a wall between locations is something we learned at midoraita. The Amar Mar, Aron Tisha, Bekaporat Tefach, Hare Kanasar. So when we're talking about the measurements of the Aron, so how big was the Aron? So we say that the Aron itself was 9 and the Kaporat on top was a Tefach. Okay, so now Rashi, Aron Gova Tisha Tvachim Dichtiv V'Amal Chetzi Komato. So the Aron is 9 tall, as it says. it's an amma and a half tall, which is 9 tefachim, as we discussed earlier. That a amma is made up of 6 tefachim. The kapora tefach harei asar, and then the kapora itself is a tefach. You know from also which is it's a tefach. Uksiv v'dibarti tkami al kapora, and Pasuk says that God spoke from on top of the kapora. From the God's voice came out, so speaking to Moshe from on top of the Aaron, on top of the Kaporet. But Tanya Parakam to Sukkah, we learned in the first parak of Sukkah. Rabbi Yossi Omer L'olam Lo Yarda Shechina Lamata Mesar. We know that Hashem's presence never went below 10 tefachim. Dichtiv Hashemayim Shemayim Hashem V'Aretz L'Am Ne'adam. So basically, anything this is going to be Shemayim, 10 tefachim or above is relates to God. Below that is that of the man. Umat Mesar Tefachim Chashiv Eretz. Dichtiv Dibarti Etcha Mi'al HaKaporet Alma Asera Have Mechitza Delamala Me'asera Lo Chashiv Le Reshut Tachtit Ela Reshut Achriti. So basically, that's from that statement of the 10, that anything above 10 amot is considered to be relating to heavens and where God resides, whereas below 10 would relate to the ground, which is where which is the domain of human beings. So that means that the 10 tefachim height serves as a wall midoraita. Okay. Okay. So lo shricha. No. That's not what it's about. Actually, it's something else. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Amat Binyan Bama Bat Shisha. Rather, David, you have a question? I guess not. Okay. So now we're going back to the discussion we had earlier about how many amot are in the how many tefachim are in the amma. So amat binyan, amat bat shisha, amat kelim, amat bat chamisha. So in terms of the things in the Mikdash, but didn't we learn? Don't we have this statement that it's 6 amot for the construction of the Mishkan, but it's 5 for the kelim? So what should Aaron have been? That Aaron's it's not 10, then it should be less. Rather, what do we say that all of the amot were benonit? So really, it's the same. So my equal meimar l'Remeir ki ata hilata lagud below amud uldofan akuma. So rather, what are the? So then, what is it relevant for? The 5 versus 6 for good as and good aches, for lavud and for a bent wall. So now, what are those? What are those things? So let's look at Rashi. So what is lagud? Amrinan Bakama Dukte, good Achis, good Asik, Upako, right? So there's good Achis and good and there's good Asik, which we'll get to later, whether or not it's if you have a gap by the floor or a gap on the top of a wall, whether or not the wall completes or not. Discussion we'll get to as the Gemara continues. And then Lovewood is if things that are within talking with each other, we view as if the gap in between is filled in. Again, also discussion we'll go into far more at length when we get to this sugya. And Rashi's pointing out that the language of Lavud is based on the language of a branch. There's something short, and they added to it to make it longer. That's why it's the term is Lavud. And then Dovan Akuma, as we mentioned yesterday, we talked about Sukkah. That Dovan Akuma is a wall of Sukkah that is bent, either because it's actually bent or because there's an overhang out of a wall, which we treat as if the wall itself is bent. Okay, so now we're at the 2 dots, and so that means that we finished one topic, and now we're going to be again. So now this is not a new topic, but it's going to be relating to the topic we've been talking about earlier. That of the 20 amot. So, hayagvua mesri mama ubal mato kamai. So, if we had a bavoy of 20, and we wanted to, and we wanted to fix it, how much would you do so, and how would you do so? So. What do you mean? How much do you lower it by? You lower it by as much as you need till it's not 20. Like, isn't that obvious? Like, what kind of question is that? Ella, Rokwa Vakama. The question is how wide would you have to lower the whole thing? Only part of the thing. Reviews of Amar Tefach. So you don't have to deal with one tefach of it. Rav Amar Arba. It has to be four amot of the korah would have to be low enough. So the man savar the Amar Tefach because our mutar l'shtamash tachana korah. The Bershner says that you need to fix one tefach's worth, things that you're able to use the area underneath the korah. Man Amar Arba because Amar also l'shtamash tachana korah. Okay, so Rashi. So what does that mean by tefach would help you for below, whereas 4 would be if you can't carry below. So again, Rashi on the bottom, last Rashi on the page. Amanda Amar tefach kasaver mutar l'shtamesh tachana korah. The Amar chodo chitzon yored v'sotem. That means that he says that the outer edge, the edge towards the Rishus Harabim, comes down and closes the area off. As we'll get to on the Fed Bet. Hilka Kevin the Shiur stream Ama Mishum Hekerhu, Hare Yesh Heker Lomed, Aloto Tefach, Shenegba Tachadagora. Right? So that means since you only end up needing one, and it's only because of Heker, so then it's sufficient there's down underneath to be able to look up and see it. Doesn't matter how much it is.
So we're talking about the width of a platform underneath the korah.
The width of the.
So you'd be stepping
here. Okay, let me.
You want to raise the floor, right?
Yeah. It's like, how did I disable my own sharing? Somebody enable my sharing, please.
Yeah. You're sharing. Yeah.
It says that I disabled sharing.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second.
Sorry.
Make host there. Make it co-host. Now I just muted you. Up. And I'm going to unmute you.
That's not a good idea.
Okay, I can share again. We're good. Okay.
Sorry about the technical problems.
It's fine. There's much more bigger technical problems we have in Eruvin in general, so it's not a big one. Okay, here we go. So here's the diagram, right? So. And so the outer edge is where the aleph is. It's the one that's right by the Rishus Harabim. The inner edge, called Pnimi, is where the bet is. Right. So the question is, how much of the within the how far in are we doing? You only need to have that very one last tefach. Like kind of like a little basically like a door stopper at the end, or you need to have a full region of which the whole area is not 20.
So we're talking about the depth, I guess, right?
Yeah,
into the mavoi.
Right. So as we had before, the question is in terms of making the hill. You have, is it just that you need to have a place that the distance is less than 20, or is it that you have to have a reshut where we consider the halachic ceiling to be within 20?
But I think what Izzy was asking was, are we talking about having a platform on the ground and how wide that has to be? Because we're not talking about lowering part of the korah.
Correct. Well, the easiest option would be to lower the korah, but assuming that you can't for whatever reason, if you're trying to build it up from the bottom instead, what would you do?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so that's the diagram. Okay, so now I'll stop sharing. I'll share again when we get to the next stage. Okay, so according to the Amanda Amar Arba Kasavar Asulish Tachana Korah. Here, Rashi, what does that mean? You can't. But if it's 4, it means you're not supposed to carry underneath the korah. What's that mean? So that the innermost edge of the korah is what determines where you can carry or not carry. And that would mean that the width of however wide the korah is, that whole area is not an area that you can carry. As in, and for people in the mavoi, they don't have any recognition of the korah, because they're actually lower, so therefore they can't notice it. It's too high for them. להם כשישמשו באותו גובה, כיוון דאפיקתא מתחת הקורה, צריך שיהיה מקום הניכר בקשו. Basically, because you've used it as you can't go underneath the Korah, so therefore we have to have what amounts to so much like in baseball, like warning track. So that way there's an area which you step up onto, and then you'll be within the 20 to then notice that there is the Korah, but it'll give you enough space that we don't actually go into the zone we're not supposed to, which is directly underneath the Korah. Okay? So it's for more, we'll get to more discussion of how the Korah works inside or outside on the Chet Mabet. So, and then the Gemara says, back on again, we're on Hamid Aleph, second line, that lo dechule alma kasavri mutar l'shtamish tachat Korah. Rather, no. Actually, everybody agrees that you can carry underneath the Korah. Rather, they're arguing something else. Mar savar Korah mishum heker. Mar savar Korah mishum mechitza. The question is, how does the Korah work? Is the purpose of the Korah to remind you that you should stop now? In which case, then very much matters that you have an area that you're within 20 of you can see. But you say the word mishum mechitza, that basically it creates a wall dropping straight down from where the Korah is. Then, as long as where the wall is occurring, the wall is a proper height, doesn't matter the rest of the mavoi. All that matters is the very edge, the one tefach, is all that matters. Alternatively, there's another way to explain this stuff. Okay. Everybody agrees that Korah is because of heker. It's not really a wall, because it's hard to say that, it's a wall if it's a Korah on top. Because you're missing you're missing the main part of the wall in the middle. Right. The question is, we're referring to the heker from above or below. Like, from which way are we heading towards? Are we heading towards the Korah? Tomorrow savar arminon heker shalmata keker shalmala. Tomorrow savar lo arminon heker shalmata keker shalmala. Okay, so the difference between the angle of which you are relating to it. Okay, so let's look at the diagram to see which one is which. Okay, here we go. Does it have a diagram here? Nope, never mind. The diagram does not give the perspectives, so I will stop sharing. Okay, so we're going to look at Rashi. We're going to look at Rashi instead. Okay. Let's see. Let's find the exact words in Rashi. Okay, actually, Rashi doesn't help us out here, but basically the question is whether or not, again, are you looking at it from the perspective of below or above? Right? We're talking about people coming from Rosh Hashanah, we're talking about people coming from Rosh Hashanah. From the Mavoi itself. So the question is, from which side are we looking at it? Will be the difference. Is it if you're people walking, do you want to remind the people who are walking, who are currently in the Mavoi, look up and see? Versus is the point that the people who are outside, because if you're in the Ram, technically you're allowed to carry 4 amot, but that if that within those 4 amot you cross into another rishus, you will also be over on Isra Vatzah, even if you haven't actually gone more than 4 amot. You just go right over the threshold, even if you moved it only a couple inches, that still has to be mechayim. Okay, so another way to explain the machloket of whether you need to have, it should be 1 or 4, is Beit ema dekule alma mrinan heker shalmata keker shalmala. Rather, the argument isn't about the perspectives from inside or outside. Rather, it's a question of maybe you'll make it less. It'll be less. Rashi, Shemi Bachet, Gzer Shemi Bachet. Al Yidei Drisat Regalim, Bachet Hamiut, Viamon Al Pachot Mitavach, Hilgak Binan Tvei, Kevin Pikte Meheker Shamala, Vokmod Arba, the Chashive, Bechol Dukta. Rather, so why do we make you do it 4 wide as opposed to 1? Because if it's only 1 tefach wide, it's very easy for that for people to step on it and for it to get destroyed, accidentally. And then once that happens, then it no longer has heker working at all, and people will not notice it. But if it's 4 tefach wide, then it's much harder to destroy it, and then people will keep remembering. Okay. So now that we mentioned, now we're going to until we're talking about it being too tall. Now we're going to talk about the issue of it being too short. So if you have if you have an entrance that is only not that is 9 or less, and you want to be able to use it as a proper entryway, you should how much should you dig away in order for it to reach 10? Okay, so let's show the diagram just so people can see. Right, so again, similar to what we had before. So this is diagram number 25. So the question, so then we're not lowering the rest of the mavoi, just talking about at the edge over here, how much you have to cut out. So the Gemara then says, how much? So what do you mean by how much do you need to cut out? Do you need to dig out? Like you'll cut out as much as you need, just like we had before by Sutal. It's the same thing here. It's like, what do you mean? You'll make sure that's 20, that it's 10 now. Like what's so complicated? Ella, will become rather similar to before. The question is, how deep in do you have to dig? Rashi, Moshko shel chakak, l'toch orech hamavoy b'davar habolit, kagon miut shayach l'meimar, rochav. B'davar hashokea mekifot oto mechitzot kagon achakak shayach omar l'shon mashach. Basically, we're trying to pull everything back into the mavoi. So we're basically shoveling out by the edge, as opposed to digging, leave like so for the whole area from the beginning. Not simply that so you dug a dirt house, and like with a very small window. It's more that no, you have to make sure that the whole entryway area is dug in, similar we had before about the building the platform to raise it. Similar, the paralleling is the exact same thing here for how far you have to dig. Rav Yosef Amar Ba'arba. So Rav Yosef says it has to be 4 Tvachim. Abai Amar Ba'arba Amot. So now the argument, before we were talking about the question of Tvachim, but now we're talking about the question of Amot, which is 5 times, which is a much bigger difference in size. So maybe they're arguing about Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi. They're arguing about what Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi said. That's the argument about Ditmar. So now we're going to mention the statements of Rabbi Asi and Rabbi Ami. Ditmar mavoi shenifratz mitzido klape rosho. So now in the case where, let's say, if we have a mavoi that was broken into. So so back to diagrams. So as you see here, so if you had a break in the mavoi towards the entryway, what does that do? So the question is, how big can this gap be before it creates a problem of basically of you have to be talking this side just like you were talking the other side. So so within that case, so Itmar Mishmei Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi. So we have to say in terms of both of them. That im yesham pas arba matir pirza adeser. If there is a wall of 4, that'll solve the issue until it reaches until the gap of 10. The imla pako mishlosha matir. But if you don't have an added board, then it has to be, the gap would have to be less than 3, which means that we could use level to connect to fill the wall in.
We're talking Tvachim here, I guess?
Yes, we're talking Tvachim here, not Amot anymore. The saying that if the gap was 10 Amot, then you need a pass of 4 Amot to fix it. But if not, then the gap has to be less than 3 Tvachim, because then it's not even a gap. It's considered to be the entire wall.
Love it, right.
Very good. So now, back to the Gemara. So Shlosh, okay. So Shlosha Eno Matir Rav Yosef. But according to Rav Yosef, that wouldn't work. Itlay to Rabbi Ami. So the Rav Yosef has the same Rabbi Ami that the difference between the different types of gaps of being 10 amot versus it being 3, and if you have a board filling it in. But Abai Rabbi Ami, but Rabbi Ami, but Abai doesn't have Rabbi Ami's statement of the differentiation, the different types of gaps. So Amar Abaye Hatam Saf Mavoy Hagat Kred Mavoy. The difference is where is the gap? Is the gap in the end by where the doorway is, or is it farther in? Let's diagrams. So again, in Parashai, so there's a here. So this, what is this? The one or is? Oh, that's sorry. It's in this. It's this. The question is, scroll down. So is it by the? Are we talking about a case where it's by the entryway here, and there but when I say entryway means it's right up against the edge, or is it farther in? That's the difference between the two of them. Is the gap at the right, is the exact edge? So basically, as if there's a very big gap, it's extending the larger hole over here, or is the gap farther in which case then we would say that we're judging it based on it being a gap in the wall, not being attached to the entrance to the mavoi. So Ika Arba Amot Ainli in Elo Low. So that would come down to the question of is it 4 Amot gap or not? So Amar Baye, Minamina. So wait, how do you know that we're talking about a case of 4 Amot? So the Tanya. So we're going to write which will support. We'll support him that Ein Mavoi Nitar Velachi Vikora Ad Chu Batim Chaterot Ptuchin Latoko. So when do we say that you can fix a mavoi with simply a lechi or a kol, which is the case that we're talking about until now? It has to be that the houses and the chatzer all open up into that mavoi. And if you say that the gap can't be 4 amot, then how could you ever have that be the case? It's like you have to have an entryway at some point to get in from the chatzer or from the houses. What do you mean you can't have a gap of 4 that the whole thing's no good? What about coming from the chatzer? Let's say that the gap was in the middle wall. So it means not towards the end, but let's say it's smack in the middle. So what are the features of a mavoi that we allow us to do the electric core to steal it off and turn it back into a reshut yachid? Only if it is wide, if it is longer than it is wide. But and it has houses and chazer opening into it, i.e., it's not being used. It's not being used as a mavoi that's living between two reshut rabbins or anything. Rather, it's simply a one entrance alleyway. Rav Yosef to patak levit Karen Zavid. Rather, how does Rav Yosef solve it? He says he's talking about the case of where the opening is on the corner. So when the opening is on the corner, that would mean that here. Okay, so let me share the photos. Let me share the photos again with you. So what do we mean by what do we mean by the corner versus the middle, right? So the question is here, when we say there's two gaps, we say the gaps are, again, so when we say that there's an opening here, that means that there's a doorway, and then there's another, and then there's another wall, another doorway. That's if it opens up into the middle of the mavoi wall, right? So the mavoi wall has these two entrances coming in from the houses. And then on the other hand, we have the case of Patakle, Karen's of it. This opens at a corner. So we see here, so there's a wall, gap. But notice here how you'll also see a diagram in your Gemara as well, where it has basically we're seeing at the bottom right corner of the page, where it shows how that gap is measured. So even though each square here, right, is considered to be a tefach. So the way it works here is this gap. Okay, I'm not drawing diagonal lines here. Second, let me here. Let me try and I'm doing the drawing. I'm actually drawing. Basically, so you see, here on the right here, you see the diagonal here. So even though the gap is diagonal, so diagonally it could measure out to be 4. even though on the side here from the gap it's actually 3, right? If you see the squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it's talking about where it's at an angle, and that's how we get to it, even when it's 4 while really being 3. So that's what I mean by it opens at a corner. So Amar. Okay, so back to the Gemara. So Amar Abaye Mana mean a lot. So how would you know that could work? About if it's on the corner, it'll be better. Amar Rami Barafama Amar Ravuna Lachi Abole Bidofno Shel Bavoy Pachot Mi'arba Amot Nidon B'Shum Lachi. That if you have anything sticking out of the wall, from the wall of the Mavoy, if it's less than 4 Amot, then you can call it a Lachi. So that means that if you have let's say for a lachi, we actually have a limit on how big it can be. That if the lachi is less than 4 amot, then it's considered to be a reminder. But if it's too much, that means it went from being a lachi to now basically being a wall, and then there's an opening, which would be a problem. It would no longer be reminding us about the changing of mavoi to zetarab. It would only be simply all we know that there's a door. It wouldn't be weird for us anymore. It wouldn't be a reminder anymore. Right, so then if it's below 4, the side of the wall that sticks out, we're trying to use it here for the Karen's of an example. So if things are sticking out at various angles, then we can rely upon it. Here we go. We're going to share again. So you can see what we mean when we say left yabole. So okay, so here we go. So you see here. So this is what it means: is that there's something sticking out. So if this extra wall or left that's sticking out is sufficiently small, it can help. It serves as a reminder. Once it's a certain. If it's too wide though, then it shifts from being a lechi to being a wall, and then we have a problem. V'Rav Yosef lapuke mitorat lechi. And what Rav Yosef? Rav Yosef lapuke mitorat lechi ad ika arba amo lemihave mavoi afilu barba tzachim nami have mavoi. But Rav Yosef would say no, like as in a lechi is a lechi, and we're not really worried about it becoming a wall, and that's like if you put it up as a mitorat lechi, then it's still a lechi, no matter how big the lechi happens to end up being in the end of the day. Okay. So I see that we're basically out of time. So just to summarize, what we covered today. Today we covered chatzitzas, what midoraita, frubo umakbid, majority, and you care midrabanan. It's either that covers the majority or something that bothers you. Then we wanted to talk about about how would you fix in terms of either fixing the entryway itself, whether if the mavoi is too tall or too short, and then at the end we were discussing what if you have the entryway on different sides, how would that work out, and whether or not it mat and how you'd measure it out. Is it based on an angle? Does corner does it help? It does it, and if you have a lechi, is there such a thing as a lechi that becomes not useful at a certain point? And that's where you have the machloket between Abaye and Rav Yosef, whether or not it can pass itself or not in the end. So that's what we have for today. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now. If you have to go, feel free.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Is anybody else? Okay.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joel. Please.
Okay. Question with regard to the lechi. You said that a lechi, if long as it's less than 4 amos wide, a breach in the wall will help, right? But as far as a korah goes, that we learned from the Heichel that it could be as wide as 10 amos. Is that correct? Like, so that's the difference between a korah and a lechi?
Yes, because
and the positioning of where the breach takes place, right?
Correct. Just for terminology, so we're not talking about a breach like a so there's a difference between a pirza and the entrance.
Okay.
We're gonna get so as in what the Lechi and the Korah come to do. They come to fix the entryway. They don't come to fix there's a breach in the wall, which is called a pirza.
Oh,
So
okay.
so as in that's a separate question. Once you have a big enough breach, that becomes problematic, which we're gonna get to about breaks in the wall being a problem, and sometimes they won't even be able to fix it with the Lechi or Korah because it's a broken wall, which is worse than an entryway. But yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay, so just my question is, where we had, let's say, whatever we call it, where we said the Lechi helps if it's 4 amos or less, let's say in the side or wherever, corner, if it's greater than 4 amos, would a Korah help?
Yes. If the Lechi is no good, you can add a Korah and it would be fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So they're not mutually exclusive. And even if let's say if you had the case where let's say the Korah was placed too high, but if you put a Lechi there, that could solve the problem. As in either or can help.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Excellent share. Thank you.
I have a suggestion, Rabbi Metzger. I think it'll be easier for you if you just left the diagram up all the time and shared your screen all the time, just so we can see. Because I have the parish high, and it just makes it much more clear if I could see the diagram all the time. I mean, I also have the art scroll, it has great diagrams, but I think it'll save you some time from switching back and forth. Just a suggestion.
Okay, then I missed out on being able to see everybody if I have that shit the whole time.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
You're right. Okay.
I'll see if I can get a setup that I can, if I can get 2 computers going, but it seems like that's a little complicated. So
Okay.
I'll try and when the diagram is helpful, I'll try to leave it up for longer. Sometimes when we get to the parts that are not diagram related, I'll leave it off.
Perfect.
Good point. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Rabbi, when are you coming to Toronto? Do you have an idea?
I will hopefully be there the first week of September,
Very
but
nice.
subject to travel and travel restrictions, and if anything happens in terms of like if I catch a quarantine or catch corona along the way. So please God,
Gotcha.
I'll be in.
Okay.
I'll be in.
God
Toronto.
forbid.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Bye,
Looking
September.
forward. Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay.